Hello, Calvary Apostolic Church. I am here today starting off a series on Mothers of the Bible, kind of a mini-series that we're going to be doing in honor of Mother's Day that is coming up this Sunday. And just a reminder, we will be having our drive-in service. Please be following our Facebook page for further announcements on that and all the special things that will be taking place this upcoming Sunday. So I'm going to jump right into this devotion here. And today we're going to be talking about Jochebed. Now, who was Jochebed? You probably don't know who she was. You may or may not know someone by that name. But who was she? And I can give you a couple hints. She was the daughter of Levi. I don't know if that helps you out at all. She was the wife of Amram. Maybe that helps you out. But probably the more obvious one, or the one that we would recognize, is she was the mother to a man named Aaron, and to Moses, and to Miriam. So when we say that, we recognize, oh, okay, well, yeah, now I know who Jochebed was. It was Moses' mother. I know who she was. We're best friends. No, but we are triggered by that because we hear the name Moses and Aaron, but we would not know about Moses and Aaron if there would not have been a Jochebed. And we're going to learn the significance of what she did during her time and what we can learn from her during this time that we are in right now. And so the mother of Moses is famous in the eyes of God, not because she had a baby, not because she had Moses, but because of her faith. And her faith knew no defeat. Nothing was going to destroy her faith. And when we are thinking of faith in this lesson, we're not thinking about salvation. We're not thinking about anything like that. We're thinking of a faith that is sustaining faith. Faith that holds us through a difficult time. Faith that allows us to believe a promise, even though that promise may not come to pass right away. Jochebed had sustaining faith. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. Surely those words has to include the concept of sustaining faith. Without sustaining faith, it is impossible to please God, because if we do not have sustaining faith, then why are we going to live to please God? We have to have sustaining faith. And that is what Jochebed was famous in the eyes of God for. It was her unwavering, undying faith in something that she knew was bigger and was better than what she could ever do on her own. So the life of Jochebed is an amazing demonstration of walking by faith. The story is familiar to many, but we'll recap it. We know that they were living in a time of slavery. They were Israelites living in Egypt, and they were bound by the slavery of Pharaoh. They were forced to do hard labor, and it had gotten so bad that the Pharaoh was actually fearful that if the children of Israel became stronger, if they became stronger people, they would create an army and they would rise up against him. And so he had issued a decree that every male child that was born was to be thrown into the Nile River, which was where the crocodiles lived at that time, and they were to be sacrificed basically to one of the Egyptian gods. They would throw the babies in. The crocodiles, they would either they would eat them, the babies, or they would drown. And what a terrible, terrible thing to have, especially if you were someone in Jochebed's shoes, knowing you were about to give birth to a baby and not knowing in those times if it was going to be a boy or a girl, and what was going to be the outcome of that birth, and what were you going to have to do with your child. So that is the background of where Jochebed was at during this time in this story. So number one, first we're going to notice several aspects of Jochebed's faith. So we're going to go through several of these. And number one is the trial of her faith. Have you ever felt like your faith has been tested? I think we've all been there, and especially during this time that we're in right now, I feel like daily our faith is tested and tried to see whether or not we are going to be stable and strong during this pandemic that is going on. And Trials and difficulties, obstacles, they come to all of us. It's life. It happens. We can't control it. It is what it is. It's life. It's a part of who we are and what is in our world today. The conditions described in the first 2 chapters of Exodus indicate that those were dark days for the children of Israel. Can you imagine working hard labor for someone and not getting anything in return, and then knowing that your children, if they were born a male, were to be thrown to be fed to the crocodiles and the alligators of the Nile River, or be drowned? What a terrible, fearful life that they must have been living in at that time. So Amram and Jochebed, Moses' mother and father, had no fear of the king's decree. You see, she was aware of the decree. She knew she was pregnant. She knew that the chance was could be a boy, and yet she had no fear. We obviously know that when the child was born, he was a boy, and he was later named Moses. So there was the trial of her faith. We see the trial is the time she lived in. And then we go on to point number 2 is the foundation of her faith. See, Jochebed was just like you and I. She was a human being. She was flesh and blood. She had emotions. She had fears. She had good days and bad days. She was you and I. Just like we are today. We have our good days. We have our bad days. We have our days that are full of fear. We have our days that maybe are better than others. She breathed air just like you and I. She had feelings. She had emotions. She had problems. She was a human being. But in the middle of all of that, she had confidence and she had hope. So what was that confidence and hope based on? Was it based on the hope that the Pharaoh would withdraw his decree and that her baby would get to live? Or was her faith and hope on that she could keep the baby quiet enough and nothing was going to happen? What was her faith and hope in during this time? It was based on the promises of God. You see, the parents of Moses knew that the children of Israel would never perish. You see, the king of Egypt had plans for the children of Israel to perish. He wanted to wipe them off of the face of the earth. But they knew that the great I Am had promised that the children of Israel would never perish from off the face of the earth. You see, God had made a promise to their forefather, Abraham, that he was going to make of them a great nation. And they had faith and they knew that that was not just to be a nation to be wiped off the face of the earth. They really, truly had not become a great nation during this time. Jochebed knew that God had foretold the bondage of Egypt. God had told Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. That's where they were at during this time. Abraham's seed was in a land that was not theirs. They shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Here is a promise from God that the children of Israel are going to be in a place that's not theirs. They're going to be tried, but they're going to be coming out of this place after a certain time period with great substance. So Amram and Jochebed, they added up the years. God gave them a timeline, and they had faith in God that he was going to keep his promise. We learn that Hebrews 11:23, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandments. Why were they not afraid of the king's commandments? Because they had unwavering faith in something that was stronger than who they were. So Moses was hid in his home until he began to cry and had developed his lungs. And it was by faith that she placed him in a basket and put him in the river. You see, Moses was not hid because Jochebed was fearful. Moses was not hid because she could not bear to see her child perish. Moses was not hid because she loved him too much to cast him into the river. It was by faith he was hidden, not by fear. The parents of Moses believed the simple promise of God's word that he would bring them out of bondage. So first we see the trial of her faith. The foundation of her faith is the promise that God had given them. And then we go to see her exercise her faith. See, so often we have faith, but we don't exercise that faith. We say, oh yes, I believe that God's going to do this promise and it's going to come to pass, but we don't exercise on it. Jochebed had a deep, abiding faith in the trustworthiness of God's word that it drove her actions. Everything that she did was driven by the fact that she trusted in God's word. She did not sit down and brood about the situation. She didn't say, woe is me. She said, if this child is to be Israel's deliverer, then God's just going to somehow spare him and deliver him and just pick him right back up out of the water. She didn't say that. She didn't say, oh, we'll just throw him in the water, and if it's God's will, then he'll just miraculously survive. That's not what she did. She knew that God expected her to do her part. You see, so often we say, oh, God, I have faith, but you just do it in your hands. And we expect to sit back and not do anything about it. And we just wait on God to work it all out. When in reality, God is waiting on us to act on our faith and do what he has called us to do. Jochebed did not say, I'm going to throw the child into the river. If he's God's man, God somehow will save him. That is not faith. That is fantasy. That is dreaming. That is assuming. That is hoping. But that's not faith. Faith is not testing God by jumping off a bridge and saying, God, if it's your will for me to survive, you'll catch me. Faith isn't putting your hand in a poisonous snake den and saying, God, if these snakes bite me and I live, then it's your will for me to remain alive. That's not faith. That's just lack of common sense. That's not how God works. God has asked each one of us to do our part when it comes to exercising our faith. So Jochebed did what she could. She hid Moses for the certain time until his lungs developed and he became louder, as we know all children do. And then she made a basket out of reeds, and she pitched it with tar, and she made it waterproof, and she took him down to the Nile River and hid him. After Jochebed did all that she could, she went back home. Now understand this. She did what she could do, and then she placed it in God's hands, and she left the situation. So often we do what we think that we can do, and then we wait, and we beg God, and we plead God, and we say, God, your timing isn't working out. This isn't what you promised. And we stand there and kind of tap our watches and anxiously wait instead of just doing what God's called us to do and stepping back and allowing him to work. Yet Jochebed, that's exactly what she did. She did what she knew she could do, and she placed it in God's hands. After she did all she could, she went home undoubtedly with a great sense of trust that God would work things out according to his plan. Do you trust that God is going to work things out according to his plan? Do you trust him enough to leave your child, so to speak, your needs, your life in his hands, and to step aside and allow him to do the work that is needed in your life? Sometimes that's a question that we really need to ask ourselves. Do I trust God, or am I anxiously waiting for my time when I think it should come to pass? But see, Jochebed trusted God. She complied with the royal decree, but in protecting the child from the deep waters of the river, essentially the point of the decree in killing the baby was disregarded. She obeyed the king by placing the child in the river, but the king never said that you couldn't place him in a basket that was waterproof and allow God to work a miracle. The king never said that. So we see that she was tried in her faith, then the foundation of her faith, then the exercise of her faith, then the response of her faith. So then we see in Exodus 2 and beginning at verse 4, God in response to the faith of a mother who dared to trust in God. sets in motion a chain of wonderful events that will set forth the plan that he has to free the children of Israel from bondage. First of all, we know God began to move upon the heart of Pharaoh's daughter. When she went to the water's edge to take a swim with her handmaidens, she went down there and she heard the cry of a baby. And she reached down to the baby. Now she could have taken the baby and taken him out of the basket and thrown him into the river. She could have done that. It was her father that made the decree. But God softened her heart. She pulled the baby from the water. We know that the daughter found a place of love in her heart for this baby, for this child. There was something supernatural and marvelous taking place. This was God responding to the faith of a mother who dared to trust him. You see, when the little crib was brought to Pharaoh's daughter, she saw that it was a Hebrew baby. Again, she had the opportunity to destroy this baby. We must remember that the young woman was the king's daughter, that she began she could have obeyed her father at this time, but she chose not to. We know that Moses' sister was waiting, watching anxiously to see what was going to happen to her baby brother. And when she saw that Pharaoh's daughter had pulled the baby from the water and that she had this connection with the baby, and that she wanted to love this baby, that she wanted to take the baby home as her own, Miriam thought, oh, I have an idea, when really it was God's plan in action. Miriam ran forward and said, I know of a Hebrew woman that could be a nursemaid for this baby. And we know how the story goes. The response of her faith, Pharaoh's daughter picks up the baby, picks up the child to take home to her home and to love on this child and to raise Moses as her own. But the reward of Jochebed's faith, she exercised it. We see the response of her faith was Pharaoh's daughter in action. Then genuine faith has its rewards. Not only was Moses spared, but his older sister was standing out of sight, saw the Egyptian princess pick up the baby, and knew that the Egyptian princess would want to have a servant to take care of this baby. So she ran and told her about a Hebrew woman who she knew. And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse it from me, and I will give thee thy wages. So Jochebed took the child and nursed it. We see here that Jochebed then had the opportunity to instill in Moses, who was Pharaoh's daughter at that time, by law I guess you would say, to instill in him a knowledge of the one true God. Jochebed's faith was rewarded by being reunited with her own child. The goodness and mercy of God were so great that the mother was even paid for taking care of her own son. At the beginning, he was to be destroyed. He was to be killed. And we see because of her faithfulness, she was paid to take care of her son. Who does that? How does that even work out? But God, and being faithful to him. So as we journey through life, all of us, we will all have our faith tried. Apostle Peter says that the trial of your faith, being more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. The afflictions of our life are like driving through a tunnel. The sun has not stopped shining just because the traveler is in the tunnel. So, who are you today? Are you that traveler in a dark tunnel who feels that the sun has stopped shining, who feels that God does not care anymore, who feels that the timing is not going how you think it should be? You see, one of the things that we have to learn as Christians as we walk through life, and especially at this time that we're going through, is sometimes sorrow crowds in. Troubles are going to pile up. And it seems like God is just throwing rocks at us. But just remember that the trial of your faith, if we allow it, will bring honor to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords through our life, so that we can speak out to others, so that we can reach out to others. For those of us who follow Jesus, the final note of this message and this lesson from Jochebed is a call to preserve unwavering faith. No matter how many obstacles have appeared in the way, can we allow our faith to stand strong? When we don't have the answers, when we don't know what the outcome's going to be, when we don't know what the days and the months ahead are to bring, can we still have the unwavering faith? Jesus says to us, if you continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Thank you so much for joining us today in this devotion. And I hope today that we can learn from Jochebed that God's word remains the same. It never fails. We never have to doubt if it's true. We never have to doubt if it's going to come to pass. If he's promised it in your life, it will come to pass. We need to do our part. We need to exercise our faith and allow God to reward our faith and see his promise come to pass.